Good morning, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2. And, well, this, of course, is my backup channel, but we're going to be here for a while. So you might as well start thinking of it as the main channel due to two looming strikes that we have on the main channel. So, as we often say, please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and let folks know that McDuff is over here at McDuff Lives too, and this is where we'll live on YouTube for the foreseeable future, because we need to preserve the three or four hundred videos I've done over there. I can't see them take that whole channel down. It would be horrible. They took down my first channel with 900. And, I thought, "Well, I can absorb that, I can deal with that," but no, it's terrible. Most of the books I read are gone. So, that's why we have to preserve, Macduff Lives, and, I may never even go back there. I might just try to turn it into an archive. I'm working with Jumping Mouse to create a platform that's not dependent on any particular provider over at screamingospreys.com. And it's called Screaming Ospreys TV. And if you haven't checked it out, please do. Um, Now, where is Harley Schlanger this morning? Well, and good morning to all of you guys. I think we have a time zone issue. You see, he's over there in Germany, in Potsdam, Germany. And while we coordinated by email, it was at least an hour or more ago. Oh, wait a minute. Here he is on the phone. Hang on just a second. Oh, I might have missed him. Let me see. What was that? I just saw his name pop up on my phone, so something's happening. Who knows? I'm not very good with these phones either. What was that? Oh, well, I'm sorry for the delay, but the issue is I think we are about an hour off in our understanding because he put EST in his email to me, which is Eastern Standard Time, and we're still on Eastern Daylight Savings Time, so that's an hour. Yeah. Oh, Jansen, that's cool. Yeah, I see you do a great job with your video. I saw you on Andy's show, and clearly somebody I can learn from. Um, so I'm going to just wait until I hear from Harley. That I sent him the link, and if he gets the word from someone, if anybody wants to call Harley Schlanger in Potsdam, Germany, and give him a shout and say, "Hey, the show's on," because I think he misunderstood due to the time zone. Anyway, hang on a second. Well, from my point of view, things are starting to get a lot more serious after the failure of the COP26, which was touted as a big deal, and Greta is very, very angry that they didn't come up with enough pledges to cut carbon emissions fast enough to fit within, the desperate situation that we're facing with quote, climate change, unquote. Oh, you don't have to listen to me read the yellow pages, Corky. But now, with that failure, there's going to be pushback, right? And what do we hear from Prince Charles? Military style. Military style to me sounds a lot like Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, right? Now, As you know, I am a passionate follower of Mark Kulak at Housatonic Live, and especially his second channel, because he's also fighting the same powers that be at YouTube as I am. But his insight is fantastic into what it connects is my work on the secret team during my father's era, when we have Fletcher Prouty telling us about this secret team that's organized by the CIA to do actions that are called for by the CIA outside the normal chain of command, which is something you don't really want in in a government that's based on the will of the people and the best interest of the common folks of the country. No, what they've got is a secret government. Then the secret team is the action side of the secret government. And now, what Mark has given me is the idea that the DTRA is the alternative to the military, to the standard military. Of course, my dad was one of those, conservative, right right wing types. I wouldn't call him a right winger because he was really an intellectual. He wasn't a passionate about politics. He was passionate about truth. He was passionate about knowledge. He was passionate about logic and thinking and using his head to solve complex problems. And that's why he rose as high as he did, because he was really good at solving complex problems. But the people that were controlling him or trying to control him were working on a different problem, and that was how to control the minds of the population of the United States so that they could do their will without us even knowing that they're doing it. And they've gotten away with it to an extreme. I mean, this is the most successful deceit program that's ever been run in the history of the world, including the Roman Empire. I think they've run a better show even than the emperors of Rome. But it's coming to an end. And I think that the folks at Schiller are correct that this COP26, has turned into the end of the old regime's dreams if they don't, you know, do what Prince Charles said. What does Prince Charles say? Said it's time to open a can of whoop ass. That he said it in royal, you know, language, but what he's saying is, hey, no more Mr. Nice Guy. And we see that they're getting away with it. That's why I want to uh Jansen, if you got my email, send me an email so I can contact you or have Catherine, who does my scheduling, get you lined up, because I really got a lot of questions about Australia for you. But it seems to me that there's no citizen power in Australia at all. And these videos we see on Twitter where the cops come along and just because somebody stepped outside to smoke a cigarette and wham, they knock him to the sidewalk. And is that real? Is that really happening, or is that theater too? I don't know. Um, I do know that these robot dogs are a real thing, and they'll have those out there one of these days when we've been softened up enough to accept them. So I'm saying right now we have to wake up, get up, stand up. You know, don't give up your right. Mm. So, well, I haven't heard anything from Harley. Let me just check over at my email and see. Mm, I don't get it. I'm gonna check my email here. Nope. Okay, I guess he just missed the time change or anticipated the time change before it happened. That's what I think happened. But we will carry on. So what I want to do is I was speaking last night about looking at different facets of the problem through different authors, and we were using Tupper Saucy's great book, Rulers of Evil, last night, but I made reference to a book that I had on my shelf. David Underdown referred to it and said he was listening to it audio on YouTube, and he got a lot out of it. And I thought, well, I've never really opened that book. Let me have a look at it. So this is what I'm going to do until we hear from Harley. Is I'm going to explore this book here. Let me oops, here. There it is. It's The World Order: Our Secret Rulers, a study in the hegemony of parasitism. The hegemony of parasitism. Um, and this is the second edition, published in 1992. The original was 1985. So that gives you a context of when he's writing. But I think his writing in this case is actually quite timeless and more important today than ever. So let me read a little bit for you here. Check one more time and see. Nope. But if Harley does show up in the chat room, we'll join with him. Okay, so I'm just going to read from chapter 1, page 17, The New World Order, new in parentheses. Sorry about that. There we go. All right. Now this is important, so listen up. In 1985, as a sequel to the History of the Federal Reserve System, this writer published, quote, The World Order as a compendium of additional information on this subject. It never occurred to me to call it, quote, the New World Order, because my researches had traced its depredations back for some 5,000 years. Perhaps in response to the exposés in this volume, the spokesman for the Brotherhood of Death went public with their claims for a new world order. Brotherhood of Death, skull and bones, which essentially was the brave new world described by Aldous Huxley in his groundbreaking novel. Behind all demands for this new order were the same imperatives as listed by Professor Stanley Hoffman in Primacy or World Order. Quote, what will have to take place is a gradual adaptation of the social, economic, and political system of the United States to the imperatives of world order, unquote. Okay, so we see that process unfolding before our eyes. The legal system of the United States is being dismantled. The political system has been under control for a long time, and our social lives have been altered to take away our attachments through family and community in such a way as to turn us into almost interchangeable Lego parts, which is a thought that I got from Professor Hamamoto, who thinks about cultural forensics. And think of yourself as one of those little Lego tiles that can be put in anywhere they want to put you. Is that where they're going? Is this, we're all going to be what I call square tomatoes? The tomatoes that they can make square so they fit in easily onto a square piece of bread, and everybody could have an automated tomato on their sandwich. Well, that was my thought 40 or 50 years ago when I first saw how they were manipulating tomatoes. Well, back to our book. As Professor Hoffman points out, the United States is the primary target of the missiles of the New World Order because it still retains, however perverted and distorted, the essential machinery for a republic which provides for the freedom of its citizens. Well, this is exactly what I've been saying for 4 years now. The actual functioning republic has been replaced by the coup. What coup? Well, you can pick your coup. Okay, my coup is the Kennedy assassination. To me, that is the coup. But other people could say, with good reason, that the coup happened with the Federal Reserve Act back in 1913. You might even go back and say, no, it's the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the creation of. Well, I'm not going to get into all of that stuff that people talk about with the Act of 1871 is a wrong path. Don't go down that one. But other people would cite it at different places. Maybe 9/11 was a coup. But let's just forget about parsing that and say there was a coup. And we are now in the post coup time. That means the government that is running things is not the government that existed before the coup. It's something different. Let's call it an oligarchy because that's what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of powerful people, families, corporations, foundations, working sometimes together, but often in conflict with one another, as Mark points out. And so do we have still, what Carl Oglesby in his book calls the Yankee and Cowboy War, the Northeastern intellectuals versus the gung-ho American cowboys from the Texas and in the West? Or is it now a military or hyper military in the sense that they're not really fighting with guns, but they're fighting with biological and chemical weapons systems? And it's not just it's not the actual use of these things. It's just the fact that, hey, I've got this and you don't have an antidote for this. But the real traditional military still exists. It exists in the hearts of the soldiers, of the Marines, the sailors, the Coast Guard, the the real army, the people that join for the sake of preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. So we still have the structure. And so I say it's like a house with the the frame is still there, but the walls are caved in. The roof leaks. It's not functioning, but it's not dead. And don't give up the ship. If there was ever a motto from the Navy, that should be applied to our country right now, this moment. It is don't give up the ship. Because if you do, then they win. I mean, it's chaos, and we have to beat each other up and eliminate each other. And then they come in and they're the phoenix. You know what the phoenix does? It cleans up after the out of the ashes, rises up out of the ashes, and just like that beautiful mural in the United Nations, the phoenix is the symbol of the new world order. So, if God's plan is to bring us a new world order, then let's just lay back and let God do it. But no, these people have decided that they are going to make the effort themselves. These are the people that Eustace Mullins is talking about. The order, and again, when I say the order, I do believe he means the skull and bones. The order's present goals were originated by Lord Castlereagh at the Congress of Vienna in 1815 when he handed over Europe to the victorious money power, as exemplified by the presence of the House of Rothschild. This was, quote, the balance of power, which was never a balance of power at all, but rather a worldwide system of control to be manipulated at the pleasure of the conspirators. Henry Kissinger has been busily reviving this program for renewed control, as he wrote in a think piece for Newsweek on January 28, 1991, quote, "We now face a new balance of power. Today it translates into the notion of a new world order, which would emerge from a set of legal arrangements to be safeguarded by collective security." Collective security. Quasi-military means. Ah. Planetary lockdown. Ah. Planetary genetic medication. Ah. All this stuff could be so useful to the order. My thoughts. So this is turning into a minefield. I guess I'll rename the show. And at noon today, I'm concerned that I don't know what George is doing, what George Webb is up to right now, whether he's doing a noon show or not. If he's not, then I'm happy to go on and do the show with Harley. But if he is, I don't want to interfere. So maybe somebody can check and see if George is doing a show at noon for me. I don't know. Is everybody voting today, Baker? Um, Well, I know in Virginia, they tried to get me. I live across the river in Maryland, of course, but they have had two or three uh, phone contacts. People wanted me to come over there and canvass door to door on behalf of McAuliffe. And I said, no way. I would not. I, I detest McAuliffe, and I do. I think he's a criminal and a disgusting person. A tool of the same order that Henry Kissinger is a tool of. Thanks, Jansen. Okay. Um, When minions of the world order, such as Henry Kissinger, call for collective security, what they are really seeking is a protective order behind which they can safely carry out their depredations against all mankind. This was very reluctantly identified by President George Bush after months of dodging questions about the quote, New World Order, unquote, which he had publicly called for when he finally stated it really was, quote, a United Nations peacekeeping force, unquote. Blue helmets. That's what the world order is. Blue helmets. Oh, do you see it now? Do you see it now? Do you see why they've got to collect our guns? I don't even have any guns. But if I did, there's coming a knock on the door, and Robodog is going to say, "Give me your guns," and you better give them. Because Robodog is got a mean bite, and ain't nothing you can do about it. Okay, so back to his text. A United Nations peacekeeping force. This took us back to the Second World War, which produced the United Nations. Walter Millis, in, quote, Road to War, America, 1914 to 17, unquote, further removed this program to the First World War when he wrote, quote, the colonel at that time, of course, was Edward Mandell House. The colonel's sole justification for preparing such a bath of blood for his countrymen was his hope of establishing a new world order of peace and security as a result. Yeah. Remember what they said, a war to end all wars? Edward Mandell House. Who was he? We've studied him. If you don't know who he is, take some time and check into him. Note the call of security. Once again, this is a cry of the international criminals for protection as they carry out their universal work of sabotage and destruction. House had first laid out the program for this world order in his book, quote, Philip Drew, Administrator, that's DRU, in which Drew, House himself, became the guiding force behind the government and directed it to the goals of world order. The same forces set up a Second World War from which the United Nations emerged as the new guarantor of collective security. Random House Dictionary tells us that the United Nations was created in Washington, January 2nd, 1942, when 26 nations allied against the Axis or fascist powers. In, quote, the American language, H.L. Mencken says that President Roosevelt coined the term United Nations in a conference with Prime Minister Winston Churchill at the White House in December of 1941, on the eve of the Pearl Harbor attack, which manipulated us into World War II. The United Nations became an active entity at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference in 1944, when Great Britain, the United States, and Russia set it in motion as a financial dictator. If the United Nations was created to fight fascism, its mission ended in 1945, when fascism was defeated by military force. Fascism derives its name from the bundle of rods which ancient Roman officials carried into court to punish offenders. Thus, fascism historically means law and order, the rule of law, and the intent to punish criminals. This, of course, is what the conspirators of the world order wish to avoid at all costs. The Oxford English Dictionary defines fascism as, quote, one of a body of Italian nationalists which was organized in 1919 to oppose communism in Italy, unquote. Other definitions simply state that the fascists were organized, quote, to fight Bolshevism. Thus, the United Nations essentially was set up to battle against, quote, anti-communists, as exemplified by Germany, Italy, and Japan. When this goal was successful in 1945, the United Nations no longer had a historic mission. Nevertheless, it continued to function, and the Rockefellers donated the most expensive parcel of real estate in Manhattan for its world headquarters. It was against this background that the governor of New York, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, addressed a meeting at the Sheraton Park Hotel on July 26, 1968, in which he called for the creation of a, quote, new world order, unquote. Rockefeller ignored the fact that it was Adolf Hitler who had preempted this title as my new order for Europe. The phrase was an attractive one to our politicians, as President Bush revealed when he addressed Congress on September 11th, 1990. Interesting date, is it not? In a speech carried nationally on television in which he called for, quote, a world quite different from the one we have known, a new world order, unquote. He continued to reiterate this demand in subsequent addresses on television, declaring on January 29, 1991, in his annual State of the Union address, quote, it is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind, peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law, unquote. He repeated this tocsin on February 1st, 1991, in three separate addresses on the same day, in which he emphasized the New World Order call. He modestly refrained from pointing out that it was not a new phrase, that it had been adopted by Congress in 1782 from the Great Seal of the United States, the incomplete pyramid with its occult eye, and the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum beneath it, identifying this nation as committed to a new world order, or a new order for the ages, which apparently depended upon pyramid power for its fulfillment. This symbol dated from 1776, when Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati sect, formulated a program remarkably similar to that of the world order conspirators today. Weishaupt called for 1. Abolition of all monarchies and all ordered governments. 2. Abolition of private property and inheritances. 3. Abolition of patriotism and nationalism. 4. Abolition of family life and the institution of marriage, and the establishment of communal education for children. 5. Abolition of all religion. It was hardly accidental that the Rothschilds, when they hired Karl Marx and the, quote, League of Just Men to formulate a program, received the Communist Manifesto of 1848, which contained the above formula. Weishaupt's activists had taken over the Freemason movement in 1782, which then became one of the vehicles for the enactment of this program. Its true origin in ancient Oriental despotism was revealed on the editorial page of the Washington Post on January 5th, 1992, when philosopher Nathan Gardels warned that the ideal area for the New World Order would be China, not the United States. Gardels points out that Marxism was a product of Western philosophy, that is, Hegel, but that a world order would produce Oriental despotism. He supported his thesis with quotes from the Japanese prime minister, who complained that, quote, abstract notions of human rights should not interfere with foreign policy, and from Chinese leaders who denounced demands for independent liberty as, quote, garbage, unquote. All right. Eustace Mullins has a couple of very strong opinions. And the idea of this new world order being connected to the Illuminati and Adam Weishaupt has been something that I've been fascinated with for years. If you look at your dollar bill, you'll see the pyramid. You'll see the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid. You'll see the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, and then the uh, the other Latin words, which is I can't remember the Latin, but it means he sees and approves. He being the god of the pyramid god, the god of the all-seeing eye, whether you want to call him God or not, or the Freemason God, or whatever the the Illuminati God, the all-seeing eye approves. The amazing fact, that you have Charles Thompson, as we've talked about Charles Thompson of Philadelphia in Rulers of Evil, a very important man who talked about how if he revealed the real characters of the founding fathers, that the whole country would fall apart because their characters would be such that we could not look up to them as heroic anymore. What went on in order to form the Declaration of Independence? What went on in order to form the Articles of Confederation? What happened in order to then create the Constitution? All of that stuff is still behind the curtain, and it will always be, because they decided, to tear up their notes and not let anybody know. So what do we got? We got the framework. We've got the piece of paper that says "We the people." And so that's what we have to hang on to. Because if you tear that piece of paper up and say, no, no, that piece of paper was just a bunch of old white guys that owned slaves, and we can't respect that piece of paper anymore, then you've lost the entire framework. So now I see Harley's joining us. And anyway, yeah, I think that everything has gotten hijacked. It's not just the Freemasons, it's also, the Jesuits, also the Pope. Everything that has a huge visibility in our media world has been hijacked. Now, Mark Kulak is absolutely right that there's not just one unified thing that is up there to grind us down into smithereens, because they're still fighting among themselves. They haven't got a single empire yet. But that doesn't mean that they're going to help us. We are the pawns on the chessboard, and we need to realize that we as pawns outnumber the rest of them. You know, there's two kings, two queens, two bishops, two knights. But you know, there's 16 pawns. We just need to get together and stop playing by their rules. Because if we play by their rules, we'll always be pawns. All right. Well, I see that Harley is in the wings, and what I need to do is take a short break. So I'm going to do something very sneaky here. I'm going to share a little video I made for Julian Assange last week when somebody suggested I needed to step up and make a song for Julian. So I did. And let me see if I can find that. Is this it? his family. Well, hang on there. I'm not good at this. StreamYard. Okay. His family. All right. I'll be right back. Behind the prison wall, there is a hero dying, held by London and the CIA. Whose corruption he revealed, though he knew his fate would be sealed. He's a hero, putting governments to shame. God save brave Julian Assange and free him from his prison cell today. Give him back his liberty to return to his family. Do your duty, he's a hero, set him free. God save brave Julian Assange and free him from his prison cell today. Give him back his liberty, his life and his family. He's a hero, do your duty, set him free. He's our hero, do your duty, set him free.
Tonight, and I was having a ball.
All right.
When the guy said I didn't win any money.
I'm ready.
Well, sorry about that. Am I back now? Yeah. Well, I don't know. Was the sound bad on that? I'm sorry. I just had to step out and use a little. Uh, just needed a little break. Okay. Vote Phil Murphy out of New Jersey. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to end the broadcast here, and then I'm going to check with Harley offline and see if we want to go on at noon. So don't go far, but I'm going to end this broadcast, and then we'll probably start another one, unless I can get Harley on the stream here.
There
Hello,
you
Harley.
go.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. We switched
Oh,
back off daylight time last Sunday, and I thought
understood.
you were also switching, so I didn't realize that.
Understood.
My
No
mistake.
problem. Well, we're live on my show right now. So I'm going to do, Harley. I'm going to end this broadcast, and we'll start another one at what will be noon for me. And is that okay?
Yeah, I don't have the video capability today because it's down, but we can still do. I can be on with audio. Is that all right with you?
Oh, okay, sure. Okay. Let's. Well, do you want to just keep on going then?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? If that's
Yeah.
no problem, why don't we just keep going now?
All right. Okay. Well, let me get a couple things out of the way. Um. Well, Harley Schlangers, welcome. Sorry about our little confusion there, but very glad to have you with us. And sorry we can't see your beautiful shining face, but we're glad to have your beautiful voice. And I understand everybody at your house who was not feeling well is feeling fine now, so things are good, right? Are you there? Uh-oh.
From one to another. So,
Okay,
uh,
Harley, I'm sorry I had myself messed up here and didn't have your audio for a minute, so we're starting here. So how are you how are you doing today?
we're doing fine. We got through the cold finally, and it was passed around from one person to the next, and seems to be gone now. So we're all okay.
Hooray. Yeah. And the big deal this past weekend, of course, it's been the COP26, or as the Schiller Institute is calling it, the Flop 26. So let's give everybody your perspective on what has happened, and to me it looks like a watershed in human in recent history. Am I going too far?
No, it's the first opportunity the globalists have had to hammer everyone at the same time into a zero growth perspective. And they have the US, the British, NATO, they have tacit consent from a number of other countries, but also there are a lot of countries that oppose it. And very interesting, the president of Uganda came out and said that solar and wind means Africa starves. The president of Nigeria just said, we're not going to do this. We are going to continue with coal and nuclear, and we're going to be the largest population center in Africa, and soon close to the second or third largest in the world. And we have to take care of our people. And this is the attitude of a lot of countries. So the question is, can Boris Johnson and Biden and a few others pound these resistors into submission? Or will these countries be able to get backup from Russia, China, even India? I think it's interesting. The press was playing up Modi's comments. Modi said, "Oh, we're going to go along with this. We'll be at net zero by 2070." Well, according to the eminent scientist Greta Thunberg, we'll all be drowned in the oceans long before 2070. So, the idea that Modi made some big step forward is just not the case. And in fact, what he said is we should be concerning ourselves with issues like, can we get clean tap water in countries around the world? So the update I did this morning, I asked the question, if you're really concerned about people's lives, why don't you do something to stop the sanctions that are killing people in Yemen and Afghanistan and Syria and Zimbabwe, and ruining lives in other parts of the world? If you're really that serious about protecting people, why are they not doing that? And the answer is they're not serious. This has nothing to do with protecting people from a hostile climate. It has to do with imposing a top-down global reset, which is a global banker's dictatorship. And central to that is a $60 trillion fund to go into the, partly through private equity, but also backed up by central banks, to go into a new green bubble, because the existing bubble is about to pop. And we're seeing all kinds of signs of that in terms of the inflation. This month, November, it's projected that the costs of utilities in Germany will go up 14% in 1 month. You've seen the big jump in gasoline prices. All of this is a hoax. There's no reason for it. There's plenty of oil, plenty of gas, plenty of coal. So what's holding it back? Credit. The credit is being held back by central banks. They're not allowing these things to happen. For example, the Nord Stream 2, the pipeline with natural gas from Russia, is now done. It's ready to go, and the European Union won't authorize it. So natural gas prices are up in Europe so much that fertilizer plants are shutting down. So, this is, and they say supply chains. The problem is supply chains. No, the problem is a predatory financial system that's trying to survive by squeezing every last penny out of anyone who has a penny. And that includes the consumers. And you'll see it with utility prices. You'll see it with food prices going up, with gas at the pump, and so on. So this is a big sideshow, the COP26, where you have people who know nothing about science, like Boris Johnson, saying it's 1 minute to midnight. What does he know about these things? He thinks Greta Thunberg is credible. Mark Carney and his gang of thieves from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are there, essentially with friends from Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, and others, who have signed a compact which says we're not going to make loans to any company that lends to an industrial firm. So, the question is, will people fall for the circus? Will they fall for the PR stunt called the COP26? Or in reality, will it be a flop 26?
Will it? Well, okay, so the $60 trillion, and Prince Charles, of course, along with his hopeful, cheerful velvet glove, has an iron fist behind it, which says we may need to use quasi-military means to achieve our goals.
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
Yes. I mean, look at Lloyd Austin. The major threat facing the United States and the American military, he said, is global warming. And the military is monitoring, they're prepared to monitor use of energy in countries around the world. The NATO has set up an agency to monitor what countries are doing with credit. The IMF is going to do that, and so is the US Treasury Department. Janet Yellen has an enforcement arm that will go after banks in the United States that make loans to companies that are going to increase fossil fuel energy production. So if in fact there was a supply shortage, which there's not right now, we're moving toward that direction. But if there was, and some company, some entrepreneuring group got together and said, let's find more oil, they couldn't get credit because the credit is not going into these areas. It's all going into the green bubble. And that's what the whole Great Reset, Green New Deal is all about. How do you protect a collapsed system from governments that still represent to some extent the people they serve and don't want to go along with it? And that's the fight that we're seeing behind the scenes at Glasgow. This is why the Financial Times said this could be a fiasco, why the London Economist was saying, hopefully this will change the world, but it might not. To go to your point, is this a fundamental turning point in history? If they succeeded in an enforcement capability, it would be the point at which we start to see demographic collapse, starting with the poorest nations in the world. The reason I say if is that it's one thing for someone to say, we pledge that we will cut our carbon emissions to zero by 2050. What are they going to do that? Are they going to tell their people to stop eating? Are they going to tell their cows to stop farting? How do they do that? It's not easy to go into a poor country and like Uganda, go into Uganda and say, you cannot spend money in producing new plants to provide electricity for your people. To go into Nigeria and say to them, you cannot spend money to divert water to areas that are hit by drought. Remember, that's what Gaddafi was doing. Gaddafi was building a gigantic freshwater lake when they decided to take him down. So, they do have a track record of targeting countries. How many can they target? And will they target Russia and China if the Russians and Chinese don't go along? It's one thing for Xi to say, yes, we should look at this, but the Chinese are expanding their own domestic coal production because they need the electricity. Russia is expanding theirs. Australia, Prime Minister of Australia was basically yanked into the COP26 by the Five Eyes, but he said, we're not going to stop exporting coal. So Now, how do you get people to follow up on their pledges? That's the problem they have. And if Prince Charles sends the British Royal Navy at them, no one's going to be so concerned. But if you have NATO and the US threatening countries and threatening corporations, then we actually see the velvet glove come off and the steel fist behind it.
United States is engaged in a budget battle right now, in which the president's program would increase the deficit to what they're saying $45 trillion over uh, in over a graduated increase over 10 years. Um, that sounds like financing that could be poured into Prince Charles's 60 trillion. Are these two things connected, and is it an obvious connection, or people are like, can you see like, well, these people are for the Green New Deal, and that's why all this money's there? Is that analysis something we can talk about?
Sure. I mean, it is pretty obvious. If you look at the measures that Biden is talking about, what he calls infrastructure, it's not what was called infrastructure uh, back in our grandparents' day or our parents' day. You know, if you look at the comparison between the Franklin Roosevelt New Deal, which Biden is trying to claim that he's following the tradition of the New Deal, uh, he's not even close. The whole point of the New Deal was to increase the overall energy flux density of the power systems in the United States, whether it was with hydroelectric plants, coal plants, eventually nuclear plants. The idea was that we needed a more concentrated, more powerful supply of energy in order to produce the manufactured goods and the overall economic goods that are needed for a growing economy. Biden has no intention of doing that. You know, you look at some of the programs they're talking about. Um, you know, on the one hand, to start conflating money for education with infrastructure, you know, in itself, what FDR did for education was they built new schools. What they did for power management is they set up the Rural Electrification Authority and laid 1 million lines of 1 million miles of transmission lines. What Biden is talking about is smart meters. Now, ultimately, this just became a big issue in the United Kingdom. The whole idea of smart meters is to figure out in a deregulated system how to get you the cheapest electricity. And so you have all these smaller providers. This is what happened in Texas and California when they've had blackouts. Smaller providers who promise cheap rates. They can only do that when they have a surplus of electricity. What happens when they don't have that? The rates go way up. So what's the whole point of a smart meter? When the rates go up, they shut off your power automatically. And they just, the people in Britain just figured that out, that they're being told, we're going to help you reduce your cost of electricity. How are we going to do that? Centrally controlled smart meters that will turn off the power at your house if the price goes up beyond a certain level. And that's already happening to people in the United Kingdom. And I know there are a lot of people in the United States who are being sold this idea of smart meters. It's a way to ration electricity, the way to make sure that you freeze in the dark, but you don't get a big cost for it.
Um, I just got a phone call that somebody's out at my front door. I told them they could come by at noon because I thought I'd be done, and just need to uh, give this guy a shout. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Where's his number? There it is.
I'm sorry I messed up your day, John.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Harley. I'm so glad you joined us. Let me call Joe here. It's my life online. It's all out in the open. Um,
Then you get his voicemail, right?
well, typical. Hey, Joe. Oh, shoot. All right. Joe, this is John. Okay, I am going to be another half hour. Um, yeah, go ahead and measure. Yeah. Are the dogs bothering you? Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead and measure. Take it. Do what you need to do, buddy. All right. Bye bye.
Yeah, half hour works
Oh,
for me, John.
the dogs. The dogs are going nuts. Can you hear the dogs?
Yeah,
To-
you know
the
what they say, the
Totos.
world's going to the dogs, and the dogs don't like it.
No, well, some dogs are some of my favorite people. I tell you.
It's true.
Yeah, they have incredible qualities of uh, just hanging out with the dogs is a good way to spend a day.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
well, we were talking about the Biden budget proposal, and then on the other side, uh, the Republicans are fighting it.
Well,
What's
actually, John, if I could just go back to the Biden budget proposal for a moment. The,
Yeah.
the trick they tried to pull was say that the first bill was infrastructure, that was going to be 2.9, then 1.9 trillion. It's going to be 1 trillion over 10 years, which is not much compared to what we need. The American Society of Civil Engineers say that we already have a what do they say, $7 trillion infrastructure deficit. So if you're going to spend 1 trillion over 10 years, you're not going to rebuild much. That's the first part about it. Then by including it with a broader budget fight, they created a situation where they're going to try and make it seem as though the Republicans are against people getting Social Security and retirement and health care and things of that sort.
Mhm.
And the Democrats are all for it. The Democrats aren't all for it. They're cutting the hell out of everything also. So what they're all starting from is a neoliberal economic paradigm, which is that the government shouldn't spend money that it doesn't have. Therefore, we can't spend money on anything. Now, the Republicans are more ferocious in trying to keep the spending down. But the main question is not how much you're spending, it's what you're spending it on. And this is where we have to straighten out the thinking in the United States. That the issue that was done by for example, Reconstruction Finance Corporation, rural electrification, and so on, was they invested in areas of science and technology that increased the productivity of the whole society. That is, if you move from a wood-based energy system to charcoal, to coal, to oil and gas, to nuclear, each step you're increasing the density of the energy production, which means the amount of power from the unit that's used to produce the electricity increases. That increases the productivity of the whole society. Now we're on the cusp of new areas of production using plasma physics, lasers, things of that sort, that require more energy. Now, from the standpoint of the austerity-driven neoliberal predator, that's wasted money. If we can, in Germany, they have this thing where they show a family sitting around a flower pot with a candle in it to warm their hands. And they say, if you get cold this winter, try this. Well, you're going to have people freezing to death doing that. But even if they don't freeze to death, what kind of a life is it? And what if you run out of candles? So, the point is there's no reason for us to cut back an investment in areas of technology which increase the productivity per unit of worker or people employed. The only reason to do that is for ideological purposes. And there are two of those ideological purposes. One, keep the money flowing to the bubble, to the speculative system. And a lot of Democrats and Republicans have gotten rich, and I'm talking now about elected officials, through ties to the financial system. And so they all want to continue having the money going into the stock market, into derivatives, into new financial instruments where they can make some money for nothing. So that's one of the ideological problems. The other one is the whole environmental movement, which is convinced that we're destroying the earth by having so many people on it. When the fact of the matter is, I would say overall, the Earth is in better shape today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. When you used to have the steel mills belching smoke into the sky in Birmingham and Pittsburgh, you did have chemical companies dumping water in the streams. Much of that's been cut back by using higher temperature burning processes. This is something the Japanese learned. This is what the Chinese are doing. Clean coal is a way of heating up the temperature out of which you produce electricity from coal that produces less waste. So that's how human creativity works as a factor of increasing the wealth of a society. To listen to the environmentalists, they say, oh no, that's just tearing up the earth more. What we really need to do is go back to something more simple. If we listen to them, we're going to have a world economy which won't produce enough food to keep 1 billion people alive. And that's why the important thing in going after COP26 is not the spending on it, it's where the spending's going. What's the intent? And that's what the Schiller Institute, we issued a wake-up call where we basically said there are two different conceptions of man behind the COP26. There's our conception, which is human creativity, man in the image and likeness of God, that we can produce new technologies that can create new resources. The other side says man is a predator, is an animal, it's survival of the fittest. Those who are the fittest, namely rich Republicans and their rich Democratic allies, have a right to all the resources they can steal. And if you get in the way, you're a useless eater. And those are the two systems that are battling it out now. There's only one system at the COP26, which is the predators. But we've got to make sure that people know that there's another way of approaching global economic cooperation.
Yeah. While they have total control of the media, we need to let everybody know, that those that have total control of the media are not the only game in town, and that you can actually, rise up and take control of your destiny. They don't want anybody to know that. And they don't know that. I mean, the technological net that's been cast around us all with we carrying around our phones, even myself, I like, where's my phone? I want to see what's going on my phone, that's addictive, and they know that. And
Exactly.
this whole idea of an Aldous Huxley future, a dark, brave new world, a new world of Big Brother with the all-seeing eye everywhere, which is really becoming true. All of this stuff is part of what looks like a long-term conspiracy that's been going on for centuries, if not decades. And while it changes and the particular permutations and all are different, it all is driven by the same financial system that we are now talking about, the one that now wants to say, oh, it's okay to expand credit because, there's always going to be more people out there that want to borrow. That's the defense, I think, that we get from the Keynesians, from Paul Krugman, which I haven't read, but I assume that he would say something like, don't worry about, the amount of national debt. It's just money on a piece of paper, numbers on a paper. And as long as people want to borrow money, there's going to be support for the banks, and it's never going to crash. And what you point out is so important, is that they are not giving credit to just anybody anymore. They're only going to give credit if you go along with their Green New Deal. And if you go along with the Green New Deal, then you are not producing the type of energy that's going to give you a leg up in the world. It's not going to make you rich. You're going to be producing maybe enough energy to keep your house warm in the winter, but not much more than that. If you want to drive a car, you're going to have to buy the fuel from somebody. Well, what they're doing, and I think this is something that we haven't really talked about much, but I do believe that there is a huge secret behind the scenes nuclear energy program going on. it's not the one they're shutting down. They're shutting down the public nuclear energy program. But I see in my readings and in my discussions with people, the idea that, there's this bank of nuclear energy in Kazakhstan, which is run by Warren Buffett, just take that as a thread and pull on that. The idea that, yeah, we're going to be pretending that we're generating energy with these windmills and these solar farms and all, but really, if you really want to know where the energy is going to come from, it's going to come from hidden nuclear power sources, small nuclear reactors, hidden, placed here and there underground, where we're not even really going to know about it. And the reason that I think that sounds rings true to me because of Isaac Asimov's book, The Foundation, and the Foundation trilogy, and the Foundation and Empire, where he posits just such a world where all the people, the happy people, the ones that live in the present, we're the happy people, but we have short lives. But but the people that live the underground or in the secret places, they're really running everything with nuclear power. It's just that we have lost the idea of nuclear power. We don't know what it is anymore. We've been dumbed down to the point where we think, power comes from sticks of wood, and that's exactly the picture that you get in Isaac Asimov's book Foundation, about the idea that, hey, he's really talking about the foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation. These guys are creating this world, and it is the eugenics program, and it is the division of us into castes of serf type people that they want to be able to use, and themselves, who they conceive of as the wise ones, the elites, the Illuminati in a general sense of the word, not referring to the sect or the creepy guys.
Well, John, let me
Or-
just give you a sense of why this won't work. What the European Union just did while the COP26 is going on is they cut off the electricity to a medium-sized city in Romania called Timișoara, which is an important city, an industrial center. The electricity is cut off there for everyone because the Romanian government is not paying the tax that the EU is demanding. And I don't know why they chose that city in particular. But you have a city shut down as a way to teach a lesson to governments in Europe that won't go along with the policy that's being dictated from Brussels. Now we have a similar fight in Poland, where the Polish Supreme Court ruled that Polish law takes priority or precedence over European law. And so the idea that you must teach gender equality, you must bring in the whole modernistic or postmodern education system doesn't go too well with rural and religious Catholics in Poland. And so they voted against it. The Supreme Court overturned some of these things. And now the European Union is virtually in a war with Poland over this. And Hungary, of course, is backing up Poland. And you have fights starting to break out all over Europe on this precise question. How far does European Union law go if it goes against sovereign nations? Now, the people who run the European Union and people like Ursula von der Leyen, who, by the way, his family is an oligarchical family. She was appointed by Merkel to be the head of the European Commission. Von der Leyen is threatening these countries. Now, what happens when the EU runs up against Poland? Well, Poland is somewhat, they figure Poland is vulnerable because the only other alternative is to turn to Russia. And for most of the Polish people, having lived under Soviet domination, they're not too interested in that. So NATO is building up this whole line that Russia's about to storm over Eastern Europe and take back the Baltic states and go to war in Ukraine and so on and so forth, to scare people into submission. Now, will that work? Well, the Poles know that Putin has no intention of trying to overrun Poland. But they're dependent to some extent on Western credit. And so we're seeing this fight now come out into the open more and more. There's a major Italian bank, the Monte dei Paschi Bank, which is one of the oldest banks in the world, which they were about to put into bankruptcy for a third time recently. And Mario Draghi, the I guess he's the prime minister of Italy, is a former head of the European Central Bank. He stepped in and got a loan to keep them going, provided they become a bank for the green revolution. So what happens in Italy next time you have an avalanche and you have houses destroyed and Italy goes to the EU for a loan and the EU says no more money, which happened 3 years ago? You're seeing a breaking apart of the system as it breaks down. And so they can put on their airs at the COP26 and the G20 and play like they're rulers of the universe. But the universe is not necessarily abiding by what they're saying. The question is, from the United States standpoint, how many Americans actually understand this and know this? And that's where you begin to see the problem. And I want to come back to just one thing, if I may, for a moment. This whole question of what's happening in Afghanistan, where we've put in 20 years supposedly building a nation, and the nation is destitute. It's bankrupt. It has whatever little money they have is sitting in the U.S. banks, and the U.S. is not releasing it to the government because we say we don't want to give it to the Taliban. Well, you have 4 million children, according to the World Food Programme's David Beasley, who, by the way, was appointed by Trump and is an old ally of Donald Trump from South Carolina. Beasley's saying 4 million children in Afghanistan could starve to death or freeze to death this winter if they're not helped. And what are we talking about? Dumping dollars from helicopters in some of these villages. That's not what they need. They need immediate humanitarian relief. They need medicine. They need food, but they need development programs for the future. Under a COP26 world, there's no resources that can be made available to build a country like Afghanistan. So what's Afghanistan going to do? Probably the Taliban will have to resort back to the old policy of selling opium poppies and suppressing its population, and possibly even taking money from some of the international terror groups to let them operate from there. So the policies of the people running COP26 and running the NATO and US policy are introducing a new, worse situation in Central Asia than the one that we went in and created with the 20 years of war. And that's where you see what you were just talking about, an Orwellian world, or what Biden called a dark winter ahead. This is where we're headed. And the real interesting point is they know it. They know that's going to be the result. And they don't have a plan or don't want to have a plan to change it. Just one final note on this. When you talk about saving lives and protecting the future, the women and children in Afghanistan, the world's population, well, Madeleine Albright, who was very much in command of the sanction policy against Iraq in the mid-1990s, which the UN confirmed led to the deaths of 500,000 or more Iraqi children for lack of food, lack of medicine, lack of housing. When Albright was asked about that, she was asked, was it worth it? And she said, it was a small price to pay to get rid of Saddam. Well, it didn't get rid of Saddam. It helped to create ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, you know who her spokesman was at that time in the State Department?
No.
The man who was just appointed the new ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns. The guy who's standing in front of the Congress, ranting and raving about how the Chinese are authoritarian. A guy who justified killing 500,000 Iraqi children is now in China, the face of the United States. And so when we see the Chinese not willing to knuckle under and go along with what we're saying, just keep that image in mind. They know damn well who Nicholas Burns is. They know what Madeleine Albright did. They know what the sanctions policies all over the world is intending to do to create regime change. And they know in China that they would do the same thing to the Chinese if they could. So this is why we see China resisting the rules-based order, because they're not insane. And that's an important point for people to keep in mind. They look at what we're saying and doing in the United States and saying, have the Americans taken leave of their senses? And the answer to that is yes. Maybe not the American people, but the American political leadership.
Yes, well, like I agree that from the point of view of an American citizen who's brought up on the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, it looks like they've lost their minds.
Yeah.
But from their point of view, no, they're just doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, they signed on to this, however many 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, even longer in the case of Henry Kissinger. They've been in this their whole lives. This is their fight. They're intending to win it. And they're doing their darn good job of keeping the rest of us ignorant of exactly what the fight is and what they're doing to win. But they are winning. And it's only by communicating, with you and others around the world to try to wake people up. As you say, they don't care about us. They do not care about us. That is the big message that people don't understand. Most people are still thinking, oh, they need us to run their factories. They need us to be the administrators. They need us to be government workers. No, they don't need us anymore.
No,
That's
they send the factories overseas.
Yeah.
They don't need people to work in the factories.
No. Well, once we realize what the program is, I think we have a chance of standing up and regaining our rights and rebuilding the structure that we have that we've lost around our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. We can't give up, so we're not going to give up. We're going to keep on fighting.
But what they do, John, is they produce as many false narratives as they can.
Yeah.
And then they produce them psychologically tailored to different sections of the population, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's people who want to go out and fight and die for whether or not you wear a mask, gender equality becoming, we have to have 57 sexes and recognize that. They're creating and inventing things to polarize the population around very narrow interests. And my message, the message of the Schiller Institute, and I think it's your message also, is that we've got to look at the big picture and recognize that there is a coordinating central force that's doing this, but
Right.
that they're weak. They're doing it at a point where they're fearful. They go to bed at night knowing that they could slip up and lose it all. And that's why they're doing more than they ever have to run things like the January 6th operation, where they still won't release the names of all the FBI agents and people on the FBI payroll who are the ones who stormed into the Congress. Why do they do that? Well, that's creating a false narrative. That's how they run things. And too many people get passionate thinking we have to choose a side on this, without realizing that sometimes we're choosing sides that are being set up to keep us from working on common interests.
Well, Harley, let's keep working on common interests. I am sorry we didn't get to have a full hour today, but I'm going to need to go and check on the dogs and do a couple of things.
And I'm sorry too, John. I really apologize to you and the listeners. And next time I'll be here on time. When does daylight savings time end in the United States?
I can't remember. They moved it a few years ago, and I've lost track myself. But
All right,
anyway,
we'll figure it out before 2 weeks.
we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and let's talk some more. By the way, I sent you an email which I need to get your address, so let me get that from you. And okay, thanks everybody for being with us. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you again the next time, and don't forget about Screaming Ospreys TV. It's on 24/7 for anytime you need some content to grab into. Just turn it on. Harley Schlanger, thanks again for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, John.
Bye, everyone.